Good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to begin this meditation by asking you to turn your focus towards Jesus for a few seconds. Do not look at me. Look at Him. Look at Him looking at you. Maybe you've been here for a few minutes already in the chapel. Some of us may have been here for maybe an hour. Have you been aware that Jesus is here, looking at you, loving you? Perhaps you come here and you're sad, going through some difficulties in your life. Do you realize that Jesus is looking at you, also in pain, also suffering with you? Perhaps you're happy, and you got much to give thanks to God, and you experience the resurrected Christ looking at you with happiness. I'm not asking you to be thinking and making long reflections or meditations, but simply to look at Jesus. Becoming aware of the presence of the God who is here loving us. My brothers and sisters, this is a method of prayer that Teresa of Avila used to teach to her sisters. They asked her to write on contemplation, and she gave this whole discourse first of how to live our lives, and then how to become aware of the presence of God who's always before us, always loving us. Even when we're praying in the office today, were we aware that we were praying and speaking to God with His own words? Or are we just simply repeating mindlessly those words, just reading out loud? One of the very strong points of the retreat that I made in Monsignor Asif is that he said that he does retreats basically the whole year. And the number one thing he has to teach religious, priests, seminarians, and sometimes even bishops is how to pray. Because sometimes a lot of us come into the prayer, to the chapel, or coming to prayer without really becoming aware that we're speaking to someone, we're speaking to God. So he says that we begin praying as if we're going to a house, and we go to the window and like, Father, are you there? Jesus, are you there? I don't hear anything. Holy Spirit. And basically we fall into this helplessness. And our prayer basically begins reading. We just read through the whole period of prayer. We just fill our prayer periods also with a lot of words, a lot of thoughts, a lot of acts. Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I love you. And the tendency here is becoming a monologue. It's never a dialogue. It's never a relationship. And consequently, a love for prayer, a desire for prayer, just basically just dries up and shivers. This experience of prayer, this method of prayer is not simply something that is Carmelite. Our constitutions talk about having and developing a primacy of prayer in our lives, but not only any prayer, contemplative prayer. Teresa of Avila used to teach this method to the sisters because there's better than any other method. Becoming aware of God's presence predisposes us to the gift of contemplation. And our Capuchin, I would say forefathers, all our brothers that have gone before us in our faith, some of them would go as far as never putting the hood over their heads when they are walking out in the sun or in the rain, because they wanted to remain constantly aware they were in God's presence. In 2016, our brother Mauro, our general minister, wrote a very challenging letter to the order, deploring the reality that he found in many fraternities. He writes, and I quote, "I must note with disappointment that mental prayer has become weak and is little practiced in our fraternities, and is losing the meaning and importance that it represents in relation to our identity." End quote. And our own brother Cardinal Sean O'Malley, as part of the retreat that we had for our final vows, he told us, and I quote, "A Capuchin that is not faithful to the periods of prayer is no longer a Capuchin." End quote. This is not something a challenge to us, religious, but to all of us here, including Capcor, including Barbara, including anyone, any baptized Christian. Because often we're put in situations that we need to speak about God. If we do not develop a relationship with God, who are we speaking about? If we speak about somebody or something we do not know, we simply just give up opinions. We're not giving any truth. So therefore the question that I think that it's posed before us today is this. In comparison with other things, what importance do I give to prayer and to growing in my spiritual life? And to further develop this question, I'd like to touch upon 3 points, also touching upon today's readings. Is prayer a feast of rich food and choice wines, or even the mountaintop upon which God would destroy my veil of selfishness and isolation from others, as we have heard in today's first reading? Or is prayer for me a burden that has become part of the daily routine? Do I find myself longing for periods of prayer during my day? Or do I simply avoid or skip prayer the first opportunity or the first difficulty that arises? Number 2, is prayer the channel through which God becomes my one and only treasure, thus teaching me to live in detachment, either in abundance or in need, as St. Paul described in today's second reading? Or do I worry more about material things, about what we're having for dinner tonight, than about praying? Also related to the second point, we may think about the young man in the gospel. He came to Jesus asking him what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. Jesus looked at him with love. Jesus wanted him to be aware of his love. And that gaze of love ultimately made him very sad. Because with that love, Jesus asked him to leave behind all the obstacles that were in his heart for him to experience the love of God. Go and sell what you have and give it to the poor and follow me. When we find ourselves filling our lives and our hearts with junk, basically, with material things, with attachment to people and other stuff, we're just basically just noise. We're just trying to cover up a deep sadness, just like the man in the gospel, that we truly do not believe that God can make us happy at this point in our lives. God wants us to give us the grace to do that, but we need to also take our steps. And point number 3, today's gospel tells us about how the king is constantly inviting us to the nuptial banquet of his son. In what ways am I ignoring or even killing the promptings, the messengers, which God sends inviting me to a deeper life of prayer and intimacy with him? My brothers and sisters, I understand that these are very challenging words. They're very challenging to me as well. And Teresa of Avila herself struggled with prayer for 20 years of her life. She was not faithful to it. But when she realized the grace of God, the love that God had for her, and she believed that it was possible for her to change, granted that she believed in God's mercy, she became the great saint that she is, and paradoxically the doctor in the church what it pertains to prayer. Therefore, it's possible for us too to become great men and women of prayer. But we may not have tomorrow to begin living what God is asking of us to do today. Placing our hope and confidence in the God and Father who loves us first and wants us to be aware of this love that he has for us, inviting us to hold back nothing of ourselves for ourselves, that we may receive him totally. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices.